So we've got everything together here. We've got the new Westcott Designs TRD Pro kit. This is actually a 4Runner kit here. Rear spacers for the rear. This is the lower collar spacer for the front. This is our shim plate for the top. These are our lower bump stop bushings, washers. These are new castle nuts for the top. Here is a brand new 2020 Fox strut with the original collar on it here. Here's the spring compressor. These are all the tools that you'll use if you're going to do it at home by yourself. 19 socket, 17 socket, 14 socket. We've got a 14 millimeter, a 17 millimeter, and 22 millimeter open end wrench. This here is to remove the lower bump stop to install the bump on the bottom. The spring compressor is here and a ratchet wrench here. So these are the tools that you will need to put this kit in. But everything you need is household stuff. You know, it's easy to come by. You can use hand tools, you can use power tools, but here's everything you'll need. So I'm here today with Josh at Westcott Designs. We're going to show you on how to remove the front strut to install the Westcott Designs lower collar shim or preload collar that's going to go in here. Right now we're going to just show you how to remove the strut with your tools. Josh, go ahead and show us what you're going to do.
22 millimeter open end wrench. You're going to start by loosening the lower control arm bolt in the front of the vehicle. Taking your wrench, loosen this guy up until it's nice and loose. Then you're going to come around to the rear of the lower control arm and loosen the nut on the back side. Again, till this guy is nice and loose. At that point, you'll use your 19 millimeter socket and your ratchet to loosen the two bolts on the lower ball joint. After the lower ball joint bolts have been removed, you'll come around and remove the front lower suspension shock bolt. As this bolt comes off and removes, it will allow the lower A-arm to swing away. After the lower arm is out of the way, you'll take your 14 millimeter open end wrench, remove the 3 nuts on top of the strut. Once those nuts have been removed, gently remove the strut down and out by pushing the rotor and spindle towards the back of the vehicle. And out comes your strut. So here on the bench we have both of our struts for our TRD Pro. There's a driver's side strut, and as you can see in the strut, the lower exposed area on the driver's side strut is longer than that on the passenger side strut. That is to accommodate for the additional weight of a driver and fuel in the vehicle. So there are a driver and passenger specific strut. Make sure you don't mix these up, otherwise your truck will sit probably 3/4 of an inch or an inch out of level side to side when you reinstall these struts. You're going to take your spring compressors, install them into the strut and compress the spring so you can remove the top spring perch to allow access and removal of the lower perch that we are going to change for our preload to get the lift installed into this vehicle. Once the spring compressors have taken the load off of the upper spring mount, as you can see here, then you can remove the upper spring mount safely, remove the spring assembly, and then remove the lower collar. So we have the spring compressors compressing the spring. We have removed the top nut. You have the top nut, you have a washer, rubber bushing, top mount plate, and another washer. At this point, you can safely remove the strut from the spring assembly and remove the lower collar. At this point, we're ready to remove the lower shock collar to install our new collar. Using a rubber mallet, turn the shock upside down, and you're going to hit the collar and it's going to let it come out. Hit both sides back and forth. And the collar will come out. It does require a little bit of effort to get that to remove. You'll have these two locking rings that go into the groove in the shock. Be careful not to lose those because you'll need them to reinstall the new collar. These set in the groove. Take your new collar, slide it down, seat it over the clips, and using your rubber hammer, tap it back into place. The easiest way to install the collar is take the shock, turn it upside down in a vise, and hit the base of the shock, and it will slide down. It is a very tight fit into the shock. So we have reinstalled our new preload spacer on our shock. Our old spacer has been removed, placed off to the side. We're going to take our spring and we are going to slide our shock back into the spring through the dust boot. Take our washer, and the cup side faces up. You'll take your upper spring plate, slide that down on the spring, your upper washer, or your upper rubber, upper washer, and your nut. Then retighten the upper nut. Then you can remove your spring compressors carefully. Your strut is now ready to reinstall.
One good tip, wanted to show you. One of the things we do on these spring compressors is we put tape on them to protect the spring or the housing from any damage. So we've done is we just cover them with tape. Then it eliminates any chance of housing scrape or powder coat removal from the spring compressor.
Using a large pair of channel locks or pipe wrench or a very large wrench, you're going to remove the lower bump stop. Unthread it all the way. Once the bump stop's removed, you're going to install the new supplied washer and a small amount of thread locker supplied in our kit. Just a very small amount is all you need. Reinstall the bump stop. And tighten it. Using your newly supplied upper spacer, install that on the top of the shock, and now we're going to reinstall the shock in the vehicle. In between the tie rod and axle, gently slide the shock into place. And install one of the new supplied nuts up at the top. Thread in one of your new supplied nuts at the top to hold the strut into place. At this point, the strut will hold itself in the vehicle. You can then swing your lower control arm into place and reinstall the lower shock bolt. Washer and nut. You can now reinstall the lower ball joint bolts. Here at the shop, we use a post jack on the lift. At your house, you can use a standard floor jack to raise the lower control arm up to make it a little easier to reattach it to the spindle. Take your bolts with your 19mm socket, align them, and be very careful not to cross thread these guys. We always start these with hand tools, never power tools. After you get them snugged up, you can remove the tension from the jack. Finish tightening the bolts. Then you can re-tighten your lower shock bolt. Use the same 19mm socket. At this point, we're going to remove the upper nuts we used to hold the shock in place, install a small amount of Loctite, and reinstall the 3 14mm nuts on top of the strut. So we've now reinstalled our lower ball joints, our lower shock bolt, and we're going to come back up and make sure we properly install and torque and Loctite our upper shock nuts. Using a small amount of the Loctite supplied, take just a small drop of Loctite in the nut is all you need. Reinstall. And the final step in installation is retightening the lower eccentrics using your 22mm box wrench. Make sure these are good and tight before you drive this to your local alignment shop to realign the vehicle. Remember, it's the front bolt on the front A-arm and it's the rear nut on the back of the A-arm that you need to tighten. And your installation of your TRD Pro kit is complete.